Hey, so I mentioned in my previous video that I'm going to start doing a Sunday reads thing where, like, every Sunday I just come in and talk about my reading, how it's going. I might not do every Sunday. Well, I might do every Sunday, but I'll probably do like every other Sunday, more or less. But yeah, from time to time, it'll just be like my wrap-up kind of videos. So I want to come in and talk about the books I've read over the last like week and a half or so, and the books that I've brought with me to my parents. I drove back down from Manchester to my parents on Friday, and my car's having its MOT done, so they had to fix some things on it, which isn't really a surprise, but I love my car, so I don't mind that. I'm just glad that I brought enough books down to sustain me for... How long am I going to be down? Maybe just over a week. That's normally how long I stay at my parents'. What should I talk about first? I think I'll talk about the books that I've brought down with me to read first, and then I'll get on to the books I've read recently. Okay, I'll show you them in the order I plan to read them. So, my next one that I'm planning to read is The Mirror and the Light. I'm planning to start this today at some point, because I finished one of my books today, and I have this really nice hardback edition of it. I mean, I would have just bought the paperback, but I don't think the paperback's out yet, so this was the only one I could get, but I'm really, really excited to just dive into the chunkiness of it because I'm loving the Cromwell trilogy so far. And then I can talk about this one as part of my Booker Prize list reviews, and I can talk about the Cromwell trilogy in general then. I want to read Conversations with Friends after that. I recently read Normal People, and I guess overall I enjoyed Normal People, but I did have reservations about it. So I wonder how I will get on with Sally Rooney in this book. The book I'm going to read after that is Shuggie Bain. So I got this to do the Booker Prize as well, but I am really, 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 really looking forward to this one. And I don't like to read like two really contemporaneously published books right next to each other, because I think when you read like a recently published book, it's kind of so hot off the press. Sometimes I find that it's hard to read it. I don't ever want to take the ability to read recently published books for granted, because sometimes you read them and you're like, oh yeah, it's new, it's new, it's new. But then if you just read new books all the time, it just becomes a bit like the rush of getting to read a new book wears off a bit, so I don't want that to happen. Conversations with Friends isn't that old either, but it's not like a recently published book, like it's a few years old, so I just find that doing that helps with reading normally. So the other one is Eating Fire, which is like selected poems of Margaret Atwood. I've only read like one of her poems, but it was like it was about a woman like standing over a lake and a mirror, and I just remember finding it really, really, really beautiful and good. It was poetry that was like just right, so I'm really looking forward to this poetry, and I've not really read any more of her poetry than that. And then the last one I brought with me is A Little Life. So this book was on the 2015 Booker list. Yeah, and obviously it's kind of a really hyped read, but even 5 years on, people are still talking about it. After I saw Mercedes from Mercy's Booker's Musings video on it, I had like reservations about it, but I feel like people are still talking about it. Now I know a little bit more about it, I feel like I can read it and I won't just switch off, because I don't want to switch off to it. I want to be able to read it and savour it and read it as it's kind of meant to be read, if that makes sense. But I'm looking forward to reading this just as a reading experience, I think, and to see which side of the fence I will fall on, whether I'll love it or hate it, or whether I will just not care about it at all. Okay, and now I'm going to talk about the books that I've recently read. I read Autumn by Ellie Smith, and my mum got me this edition Christmas 2017, and I hadn't read it yet. But I had read The Accidental by her, and I didn't like it that much, so that's why I had put this off a bit, because I thought if it's her later work, it might be even more aestheticised than her earlier stuff. But I actually got on with this much, much better than The Accidental, so I did enjoy this. Did I love it? No, but you can see that the font is quite big. It's only, what 250 pages, so it's... Like, I read it in like a day and a half. It didn't take long to read. And I just find it a little bit weird that people talk about it as a Brexit novel, because to be quite honest, when I read it, I didn't find it was that much about Brexit. Like, Brexit was kind of in the background of it, but it was like, it was the worst of times, it was the worst of times. That's how it kind of starts. Yeah, that's how it starts. So I like the Dickens reference, even though I've not read Dickens. But I know that is from Dickens, and I really like the opening scene. It's like very dreamy, and he like just wakes up on the beach, like, you know, in the Tempest when they wash up at the beach at the start. So I really like that imagery and the symbolism and the literary reference. Just it was just on the right note. It wasn't too wankery, and it wasn't too in your face. Like, because it was a dream sequence and it was like the opening of the book, I was like, this seems quite loud. But I think it came better at the right at the start of the book than if that had happened at the end of the book. I'd have been like, really, Ali? But because it was at the start, I was like, okay, you're striking a nice note. So I thought the writing in this one was good. She managed to write about stuff without it being boring, which I liked, because the accidental I found really, really boring. The main crux of the novel is that there's like a young girl and she's a lecturer at university. I think she lectures on history or something like that. And then there's like this old kind of artistic eccentric guy who's like her neighbour, and they become friends, and it's kind of about their relationship. So I thought that it was based about friendship. I thought that was really good, and I thought that the old guy represents this kind of old antiquated idea of like the English gentleman who is kind of like not the colonizer, but he was around when colonialism was still a thing. So he was like one of the ones where they gave the land back. So you got the sense that he had like, he was really conscientious. So I like that. But you did get the sense of this old English style dying out. So I like the way Ali Smith wrote about that. I did find that her writing on the political veil that we see contemporary identity through, I felt like the way she wrote about that was good. Like, she writes about, at the start, the girl is like at the post office trying to get her passport done because it's out of date, and then the guy at the post office is like, oh my gosh, it's like half an inch too small, sorry, can't do it, can't process it. And then she's like, but I exist. So like, it was ontological, it was like fairly easy to understand ontology. It wasn't like really in-depth ontology, but it's kind of like everything everyone can relate to. Like, no matter if you're white or black, everyone has a passport in the UK, more or less. Everyone can relate to that. So I thought that was okay, but I didn't really think that was about Brexit that much. So obviously immigration is a big problem for Brexit, but it didn't seem like that direct a focus on Brexit, which meant I enjoyed it more than I thought I did, because I was just going to say, is it just going to be Ali Smith banging out her thoughts on Brexit? But luckily she managed to portray Brexit in a way that I thought was done well. So yes, I did like this book, and I'm excited for winter. I still stand by that I'm not interested in reading spring and summer, but I am really excited to get on to winter. My dad was shouting at me about my older brother. Right. So after that, I read Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel. This was the second instalment in the Cromwell trilogy, and I do really like this edition of it. So I read this at the beach, when I went to the beach last week, was it? Yeah, last week. So I devoured this. I read it in like 3 sittings. It didn't take me very long. I probably preferred War 4 to this, but there were parts of this I really, really liked. There were only like a couple of glimpses where I thought Hilary Mantel was slipping up a little bit, but I have like dog-eared a lot of the pages. You can kind of see towards the end I stopped dog-earing them as much because I felt like the writing was actually getting a little bit weak. Not weak, but it just felt like there were a couple of phrases just in general where I was like, Hilary, you could have rephrased that. Like, there's one bit where she describes one character as, he was big as a house, and I was like, big as a house, Hilary? You couldn't come up with anything better than that? But there were literally only like 3 parts where it was like that. That general, it was flawless apart from those 3 things. I am really glad that it seems like she took her time with Mirror and the Light, so I'm hoping there aren't any things like that in Mirror and the Light. But apart from that, still loving the trilogy. And I'm probably going to talk more about this in my trilogy wrap-up video. But yes, this was good. And then after that, I read Real Life by Brandon Taylor. I'm going to talk about this more in like a Booker Prize review type video on this. I guess I enjoyed reading this. This was an easy read. I read it in, what was it, 2 days? It didn't take me long. It took me like 2 sittings to read it. And then lastly, this is the one that I finished this morning, which was Gilead by Marilynne Robinson. And I'm so excited to talk about this book. So this is possibly one of my new favourite books. I was waiting for so long. Yes, a new day has come. A new favourite has been established. So this book is set, I think it's set in some like old like waste town near Kansas. in the US, and it's about this old like preacher, and how old is he? He's nearly 80, but he's like getting really old and infirm. So his whole life he's been writing these sermons, and he's got them all like stacked up. And he's writing I guess he's writing letters to his son. So his son is only like maybe 10 years old in this, but it follows him as he writes to his son. So the novel isn't told in epistolary style, but it's told in just like this. You can see it's not told in chapters. It's just like running on, running on. I really, really enjoyed that. It really let me be able to just let the prose wash over me. This was just so beautifully and tenderly written, and I thought that this was so well executed. He is remembering his life, and he remembers how he grew up, and did they grow up in poverty? I wouldn't say it's abject poverty, but they're not well off at all. And it's a very humble life, and it isn't so much that he's writing about like the town that he grows up in, but there are certain characters in the town that he focuses on. So he talks about how he meets his wife, what he grew up like with his father. All his ancestors were like preachers, and they keep passing it down. I grew up in the church, but I have like a kind of Christian background, but I'm not a Christian. There were scenes where he, like, when he was growing up, he always saw himself that he was going to be a preacher, and then when he's an old man, this figure from his past re-enters his life, and it's this guy called like Jack Boughton. I think it's Boughton. And he baptised him when he was a baby, and from the start he never really liked the child. When Jack comes back to the town, he's kind of this mysterious figure. He was like a reckless youth. He would steal John's glasses and stuff. Like, he'd just steal random shit from his from the church. And then when he comes back as he's like a grown man, he's, you know, had this like sketchy past, and now he comes back, you know, wanting redemption, more or less. And there's parts where the pastor's like, I will never forgive him. And I was like, you're a reverend, you're meant to forgive him. And I was like, you say you're a Christian and everything, but you can't forgive him, even though he was like a really deadbeat dad. Like, he was a pretty shit person. But I was like, now you won't forgive him? So the novel is kind of about forgiveness and redemption. I thought there was loads of really beautiful imagery about water and light. And I think anyone from a religious background, or you don't have to be religious to enjoy this book at all, because I'm not religious, but there's lots of beauty in religions that people really get not seduced by, but it really fulfills people's lives, like the beauty, like some of the beauty of the Proverbs in the Bible and that sort of thing. So I thought the novel was kind of like a testament to the part religion plays in people's lives. So I loved that about the book, and I thought that it like flips about quite a lot, but the tone of it was really, really just so good. It was like so gentle but observant, and you get the sense that because, you know, he's a pastor, he writes a sermon, so he's a good like writer in a sense anyway. The voice behind the text felt so truthful, and it really reminded me of how much I love first person perspectives in a novel. I think first person is probably my favourite type of narration, and it reminded me why I love first person so much. I really like that even though he's this really humble, kind-hearted man, he still has these flaws that make him human. But Jack helps him come to terms with his own life as well. So there's a lot of times where he wishes that he was a younger man for his wife. Then when he sees that Jack talking to his wife, and they don't even talk very much, but when they do talk, he just gets jealous. And you get the sense that he kind of wishes that him and Jack have this kind of connection. And the more and more I read it, the more I saw Jack as a kind of double for the Reverend. So the Reverend has lived this kind of Christian life, as you imagine, like a good Christian life. And then Jack has been, you know, a bit of a rogue. So there's like jealousy and there's resentment on both sides. So he kind of represents a double of the angry, reckless youth that maturity and adulthood bash down as well as come to terms with. So I really loved this novel for that. It's only like 280 pages, so it's not that long. But around page 120, I was like getting a bit like, okay, I'm loving the writing, but where is this going? Like, is this going to be just him flitting about through his memories, or is it going to pick up pace? And then when Jack Boughton becomes like a more and more dominating figure as the novel goes on, I was loving it. I was like, oh my god, Jack the Rogue, like, is he still a rogue? What's going to happen? There's like some discussion on race. I thought the way the book did that well was quite compassionate. There's a black and white relationship in it, and the Reverend is like sympathetic towards it or surprised by it. So you don't get the sense that he's racist about it or reserved about it or judging it, but you get the sense that he's concerned that society will judge it. Like, the novel seemed to be in dialogue with this idea of, when you act in the moment, what in your mind makes you okay with that, and then it conflicts that with a kind of retrospective consideration of your actions. So when you think in repose and you're thinking, oh my gosh, when I did that 20 years ago, how did I do that, why did I do that, is that any better than at the time when you made your decisions? Like, are you any better of a person at any of those points? Because you're still the same person. Like, obviously people change, but I thought it was a really interesting conversation that the book was trying to have. Yeah. So yes, I really love this book, and I can't wait to reread it at some point, because I did dog ear a lot of the pages because the writing was just stunning. Let's see, is there any of the writing that I really, really liked? Yeah, so like, here's some of the writing. Though I must say all this has given me a new glimpse of the ongoingness of the world, we fly forgotten as a dream, certainly leaving the forgetful world behind us to trample and mar and misplace everything we have ever cared for. That is just the way of it, and it is remarkable. Highly, highly recommend this book, and if you've read it, let me know. And if you've read any more Marilynne Robinson, what would you recommend of hers next? Yeah, I'm going to get on to The Mirror and the Light, and stay tuned for probably like a book review type thing of Real Life by Brandon Taylor. Alright, thanks, bye.